Welcome to tonight's live reading of The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth. The authors are Monica Shu and Barbara Moore. My name is Angel, and I'm the founder of Heart and Soul Studios. I'm going to pick back up where we left off, which was page 58. We are on the chapter called The Cosmic Serpent. And again, the format is one where I'm going to just go ahead and read through while you guys are on mute. You can feel free to do whatever it is that you do while you're listening. And then with about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes left, we'll leave that for comments or discussions or what have you. All right, so I'm gonna get started. Again, the chapter that we're on is the Cosmic Serpent. Okay. The snake was, first of all, a symbol of eternal life, in parentheses, like the moon. Since each time it shed its skin, it seemed reborn. It represented cosmic continuity within natural change, spiritual continuity within the changes of material life, gliding as it does in and out of holes and caverns in the earth. The serpent also symbolized the underground abode of the dead who wait for rebirth. Its undulations symbolize the serpentine earth currents of the underground waters. The serpent path on earth was the terrestrial energy flow. The serpent path in the sky was the winding spray of stars in the galactic spiral arm or Milky Way. The connection between snakes and birds is evolutionary. The bird species evolved directly out of the reptile species, the shiny scales becoming feathers. Some snakes are born alive, but reptiles generally, and many snakes, lay eggs as birds do. And the eggs belongs to the goddess. The formation of the world and of life itself took its beginnings from a double egg, the chromosome and its polar body, that was in parentheses, in the midst of which a germ resided, the life embryo. Some of the most ancient Paleolithic engraved and sculpted goddess images show her as a divine water bird with a long, snaky phallic neck and bearing the cosmic double egg in her protruding buttocks, so expressing in the Upper Stone Age a non-physical reality through these material symbols of becoming. The mystery of earthly life has its origins in water, in oceans, deep lakes, in shallow pools, cave grottos, streams, and rivers. In the sea-like pulse and taste of blood as well. Before a child is born, water flows out of the ruptured womb ocean within the mother. The very ancient bird-clawed and horned goddess was born in the womb of the mythical waters. The cosmic egg was created by the cosmic horned lunar snake, or laid by a mythic water bird, both bird and snake vehicles of an energy which has its source, both evolutionary and magical, in terrestrial water. She is one, she is two, mistress of waters and sky and of sky and air. In Egypt, in Babylon, in Crete, India, and ancient Europe, it was believed that her abode is beyond the upper waters, beyond the meandrous labyrinths. She was ruler over the waters on earth, in the skies and beyond the clouds, where the primordial waters flow. To represent all this, the bird and snake goddess was pictured. Her body is decorated with snake spirals. Her arms and legs are snakes. Her eyebrows are horned, and the magical source of life, the double egg, lies within her. The goddess was also she who gives life to the dead, aided by her magic serpent who winds in and out of the earthly tomb womb. The snake, with its stylized image, the spiral, was seen as the vehicle of immortality and the image of spontaneous life energy, its continuous flow. The snake could shed its skin but still live, as the moon birthed herself from her own darkness, and the womb bled periodically without being wounded. All were seen as miraculously interconnected transformations. To the serpent was attributed power that can move the entire cosmos and does. The cosmic snake winds over and around the cosmic egg like a continuous flow of water, of energy. The beginning of life within the egg is caused by the orbiting of two snakes within it. Their interaction causing and sustaining a tension field which becomes form. Okay, so we have I'll just show real quick the imagery. There's a bronze head there. Bronze female head from Nigeria with snakes issuing from nostrils and birds on the head. Okay. The symbolisms of snake, egg, horns, fish, and doe, along with the female images of vulvas, triangles, spiraling circles, all related to water, originate in Stone Age times. Egg-shaped sculptures with the vulva engraved on them have been dated from circa 6000 BC. The horned rams and bulls of Neolithic ritual were sacrificed to the ancient bird and snake goddess. Marija Gimbutas points out that the 6th millennium BC saw centuries of drought, and from this comes an obsession with rain and water symbolism, which is everywhere present in ritual, on vessels, and in ideograms of that time. The snake spiral was the basis of ornamental composition in ancient Europe, its peak expression being circa 5000 BC. So we have here some extremely ancient and mysterious connections or psychic resonances involving snakes, spirals, waters, and the tides, menstrual periods, the moon, the dead, oracular powers, psychic healing, bisexuality, the magnetic earth current, the womb, the stars, immortality, and ever-renewed life. In Africa, snakes issuing from the nostrils indicated clairvoyant powers, doubtless related to the third eye. The pineal gland behind the nose and the snake hair of Medusa had the same significance. One legendary historic Medusa was an Amazonian queen in the region of present-day Morocco, Algeria, North Africa. According to Merlin Stone, snake venom injected into people who have previously been immunized against it has highly hallucinogenic qualities. Some venom is chemically similar to mescaline or psilocybin of mushrooms. Reported effects were clairvoyance, extraordinary mental powers, enhanced creativity, prophetic visions, and illumination about the primal processes of existence. As Stone remarks, the sacred snakes kept at the goddess's oracular shrines were perhaps not merely the symbols, but actually the instruments through which the experiences of divine revelation were reached. That's absolutely right, especially the mushrooms. Got it, Dr. B. And so the Egyptian cobra goddess was also known as the Lady of Spells. We can be sure the ancient women shamans worldwide were aware of this property of snake venom, and that this was one of the recognized meanings of the snake symbols and images inscribed everywhere. Rudolf Steiner, founder of anthroposophy, spoke of the innate clairvoyant power of ancient humanity, a power lost by modern man who is now unaware of his primordial connection with universal life and its magic energies. Reduced to a mere mechanism, a physical recording apparatus, he lives in a void of utter loneliness and alienation. For it is precisely the astro-lunar region, the psychic world of supersensual perception, called by occultists the astral serpent, which patriarchy tells us to destroy, to overcome in the name of an abstract, static, asexual, hyper-rational, and mechanistic system. Finally, the snake came to symbolize the phallus, male sexual energy, which was understood to be originally contained inside the goddess, born from her and returning to her again. When at the end of each world cycle, expansion and contraction, she curls up in a dark sleep. Though Upper Paleolithic images of copulation between women and men occur, icons and myths of the Great Mother do not show her actually mated with a human son, lover, until Middle Neolithic times, circa 5500 BC. At this time, and especially after the peak period of Katal Hayuk, there seems to have been a divorce of male attributes from the mother, and quite a phallic obsession developed, shown in representations of phallic cups, standing phallic stones, and ithiphallic gods. Though pictures of shamans in trance with huge erections go far back into the Upper Paleolithic. But these are not aggressive or misogynistic phallic images. Rather, they seem to represent the phallus serving the goddess, women, and the life processes of all. This is really shown in the tradition of goddess phallus stones, with the goddess figure carved on phallic-shaped bones or rocks. This phallic form of the goddess is found continuously from the Paleolithic through the Neolithic and into the Proto-Urban period in Mesopotamia. Marija Gimbutas sees these goddess phallus icons deriving from the Old Stone Age as suggesting the androgynous nature of the Great Mother. This is so. They also suggest the potential unity of the sexes in mutual love service before their disastrous splitting apart by patriarchal misogyny and puritanical sex codes. At any rate, from the period of patriarchal cosmological texts, circa 4000 to 3000 BC, the serpent comes down to us as a narrowed and pejorative symbol of male sexuality or immoral sex and of evil. The Egyptians believed that from the union of chaos and the wind, the life breath, the all goddess dancing with her own breath, came forth Ma'at in the form of an egg. Ma'at was the Egyptian word for both mother and matter. It was the primordial mud of the Nile from which life grew. It also meant truth and justice and was often symbolized both as a feather and a vulture. The feather weighed in the balance scales against the soul at death, and the vulture mother who swoops down to pick the dead bones clean for rebirth. Ma'at, as the ultimate truth, contained within herself the potential existence and non-existence of all things, all polarities. She was also pure nothingness, having no identifiable characteristics, but the eternal potency and potential of everything. Another symbol for this same complex of ideas is the Ouroboros, the serpent curled with its tail in its mouth, forming the perfect circle or female O or zero, the cycle of all and of nothing. The continuous eternal wisdom cycle of all, coming from nothing and returning to nothing again. The hallucinated dream circle of sleep, waking, and sleep. And who can say which is the dream and which is not? Next chapter, the world egg, yin/yang. The ancient great mother of all living gave birth parthenogenetically to herself and the entire cosmos. She was the world egg, containing the two halves of all polarities or dualisms, the yin-yang of continuity and change, expansion and contraction of the universe. This process is symbolized by the spiral turning continuously in on itself, by conscious breath waking from sleep and sinking back into sleep. Kali, or Uranim, dancing the universe into being and then to destruction and death. The ascending spiral is matter transforming into spiritual psychic energy. Simultaneously, from Simultaneously, from the descending spiral, the materialization of the spirit, comes the differentiation of the whole manifest world. The spiral involution of energy into matter is the primary movement of the universe into created beings. The spiral evolution of matter into energy is the creative movement of these beings, consciously evolving back to their source. Inhaling and exhaling breaths of living cosmos spirals the universe into creation and dissolution. Energy, matter. There's an arrow going back and forth in between the two. Energy to matter, matter to energy, world to spirit, spirit to world. Radiant energy can be transformed into massive particles and vice versa. The spiral is the symbolic key to immortality or eternal process and is identified with the moon. Ancient as this cosmology is, it remains the most accurate statement of cosmic process yet made. 20th century physicists, using their very different mathematical language, have only been able to confirm these ancient conceptions of how the universe creates and recreates itself. The world's eggs, two halves, were white and black, light and dark, day and night, hot and cold, life and death. It contained within itself all oppositions, but it also stated the union of opposites, as the continuum is contained and synthesized within the spiral. In the Orient, some early time in the millennia before our era, this idea was formalized in the concept of yin yang. Yin, or negative principle, originally referred to the dark or shadow side of a mountain. It shared attributes with the earth, moon, and water. Yang, or positive principle, signifying bright banners in the wind, or the light side of a mountain, was linked with the sky, sun, and fire. After several generations of Eastern philosophers, everything became classified under these categories, including the sexes. Yin was female, Yang was male. But this Eastern dualism differed originally from the moralistic dualism of the Christian West. Yin and Yang, or Yang, were not seen as hostile and irreconcilable opposites vying for control over the universe, nor was one good and the other evil. On the contrary, Yin and Yang constantly complement each other to maintain cosmic harmony, and they're not fixed, static principles, but transform each other and transmute into each other in an ongoing process. Without the eternal movements and interchanges of these forces, life wouldn't exist. Winter, which is yin, changes into summer, which is yang. Both yin and yang can create, both can destroy. The life-giving sun, which can also scorch and kill life, gives way to the dark, barren cold of the earth, in which new life seeds will invisibly germinate. The yin-yang images and conceptual categories are pagan, from the land, since they emerge from close, prolonged experience and observation of natural processes. These processes are not linear, but cyclic. Life transmutes into death, which turns into life again in a great revolving wheel. The moon goes through its changes, dies, and is reborn because it circles in a circling cosmos. And so the moon, like the serpent, is the avatar of these processes. The psychic focus is not on the mutual antagonisms, but on the subtle interchanges and permutations, the dance of the polarities. Later, Mandarin philosophers like Confucius used the yin-yang principles to serve the hierarchic politics of the Chinese court and the patriarchal state, emphasizing dominant yang over submissive yin. Earlier Taoists, though, trying to keep up. Earlier Taoists, though, gave full value to the negative force or shadow side, yin as a creative power equal to the yang. Taoism, or Taoism, a mystic and sexual religious philosophy originated in ancient Chinese matriarchy, which saw the male as the earth animal and the female as the animal of change or transforming principle. The original I Ching characters for the female and male principles, the receptive and the creative hexagrams, contain these matrifocal meanings also. As Western alchemists and later Western physicists were here to confirm, it is the negative pole that initiates the creative activity of matter. Some physicists theorize that the universe began to organize, gathering shape and motion in the shadow sides of randomly scattered particles. Also, until recently, scientists have assumed that the weight of the universe was in bright stars and speedy particles. But now they have found enormous amounts of dark, cold matter circling the stars and all galactic bodies. And this matter is preponderant and responsible for the weight of the universe, which functions as gravity. As they report, the structure of the whole universe appears to be shaped by the gravity of dark matter. What has been called the dark, the negative, the female, in both the celebratory and the pejorative senses, is now seen to be the original creating and sustaining force of the universe. Oh, let me just say it one more time. What has been called the dark, the negative, the female, in both the celebratory and the pejorative senses, is now seen to be the original, creating, and sustaining force of the universe. It is the expanding, if the expanding universe is ever to contract again, it will be from the gravity of this dark matter. The corruption of the original yin-yang oracular mystical synthesis into a dualistic system of hierarchy, dominance, and oppression occurred in the East as in the West in the shift of human culture from land tribal to court hierarchic, i.e., in the shift from matrifocal rural to patrifocal urban social structures. In the patriarchal struggle for property and power, the yin-yang equation became a tool, a weapon of inequality and repression, both economic and sexual. Now, the yin, as receptive feminine, was interpreted as sexual, intellectual, and spiritual passivity, inferiority, and subordination. Yang, as the active masculine, was interpreted as sexual, intellectual, and spiritual aggression, superiority, and dominance. In the West, also, these religious institutionalized sexual dualisms have created the idea of heterosexual patriarchal marriage in which a sexually oppressed and economically dependent wife serves a sexually and economically dominant husband. These concepts are highly political and serve to maintain and justify patriarchy and the subjugation of women. Yin wisdom is scorned by men as irrational weakness, and yang power is used to justify any kind of exploitative action, no matter how unjust and brutal. But these are not the original meanings of these terms. The original meanings apply to the inner workings of rather impersonal and certainly non-domestic forces, much like the negative and positive electrical poles in a battery. As R. Buckminster Fuller put it, energy, when its potential is built to sufficient voltage, must arc over to the dominant negative. Okay. In truth, Western Christianity's stereotypes of weak femininity and strong masculinity are among the most extreme in history. Many of these sex role traits originated among the privileged classes, the only people who could afford passive and dependent women, and for whom a bored and indulgent lifestyle made sex role-playing an amusement. Bound feet among the wives of wealthy Chinese men of the past served the same aesthetic and entertainment function and were a sign of privilege. In the modern West, with its relative economic abundance, many strict sex role traits, once indigenous to the wealthy, have been passed on via the media to the masses. So we see female office workers tottering to the job on spiky high-heeled shoes. Such shoes were once worn only by royalty, by courtiers and their ladies, and were originally devised to be worn by sacred priests to keep their mana from escaping into the ground. One thing democracy does is spread the silliness around. Unfortunately, with many of the silliest sex roles, people tend to forget their origin in culture and class and believe they come directly from nature or from God. And so we see the silliest of customs enforced with humorless severity and sometimes the most punitive laws. Extremely sex-biased roles are the product of rigid heterosexuality, intellectual dualism, and a labor exploitative culture. They didn't exist in early societies, and many of the sex customs that did exist were just the reverse of ours. For example, among hunting and gathering people worldwide, the home is not only the property of the woman, but is built by her. And if it's portable, carried around on her back when she moves. Among traditional Chinese, the women wore pants, men wore skirts. Among people with kuvad customs, the women usually give birth in relative ease while their husbands writhe and howl and grind their teeth. And among the still pagan 12th century Irish, to the horror of their chronicler Geraldus Cambrensis, it was the females who pissed standing up while the males squatted. With sex roles and customs, it is very hard to make an absolute statement. Women always do this. So with sex roles and customs, it is very hard to make the absolute statement that women always do this. Men exclusively do that without having it immediately contradicted by some culture, some place at some time. Indeed, the further back one goes in time, the more bisexual or Gynandrous is the Great Mother. And that is the name of this chapter that we're entering. The Gynandrous Great Mother. As Charlotte Wolfe says in Love Between Women, perhaps the present-day lesbian woman is the closest in character to ancient women, with their fierce insistence on strength, independence, and integrity of consciousness. The first love object for both women and men is the mother. But in patriarchy, the son has to reject the mother to be able to dominate the wife as a real man, and the daughter must betray her for the sake of submitting to a man. In matriarchal society, this double burden of biological and spiritual betrayal does not occur. For both women and men, there is a close identification with the collective group of mothers, with Mother Earth and with the cosmic mother. And as psychoanalysts keep repeating, this identification is conducive to bisexuality in both sexes. But homosexuality in tribal or pagan men was not based on rejection of the mother or the female, as is often true in patriarchal culture. Rather, it was based on brother love, brother affinity as sons of the mother. And lesbianism among women was not based on a fear and rejection of men, but on the daughter's desire to reestablish union with the mother and with her own femaleness. The collective of mothers identified with by both daughters and sons was made up of strong, creative, productive, sexually free, and visionary women. And so the ideal of womanliness for both sexes was not the enforced and mindless submissiveness of the oppressed as it is in patriarchal culture. Yeah, that's Dr. B, that's very interesting. In many of the most ancient images of the goddess, she is shown with both breast and phallus as hermaphroditic, e.g., bearded Ishtar. Divine bisexuality stressed her absolute power, especially over her own sexuality, which was a spiritual as well as an emotional physical expression. Male shamans in many primal cultures wore women's clothes and lived like women, often in homosexual relationships. The Neolithic goddess was served in her temples by bisexual or lesbian priestesses and by bisexual or homosexual priests. In the disorder of the late Neolithic, in the transition from matriarchy to patriarchy, eunuch priests served her, men who had castrated themselves in an orgiastic identification with the goddess. One branch of the Essenes, the Semitic sect with which Jesus was later associated in Qumran on the Dead Sea, served as eunuch priests in the temple of Artemis at Ephesus on the west coast of Turkey. With what we know of this period, men were feeling under extreme pressure to identify either with the ancient Great Mother or with the militant new male gods, and devotion on both sides went to extremes because such acts had become politicized with the rise of patriarchal misogyny, a fanaticizing sex phobia new in the world. Creative women and men in all ages have found rigid heterosexuality in conflict with being fully alive and aware on all levels, sexual, psychic, and spiritual, because it is a mental and emotional limitation as well as a physical one. It is as if on all levels of our being, we are split in half, locked into one half and forbidden the other. We are split against ourselves and against the self in the other by this moralistic opposition of natural polarities in the very depths of our souls. And the result is war, necrophilia, alienation at the root. And if we don't resolve this, we will all die of either mutual murder that is, no, we will all die of a mutual murder that is total suicide. As Esther Harding says in Women's Mysteries, Ancient and Modern, modern woman at the core of her being is cut off from the source of life. With rigidly imposed heterosexual roles, women and men also are emotionally and mentally stunted. Women are also physically stunted. Compare us with statues and reliefs of the Amazons or of the huge Celtic warrior women. In ancient Scotland, land of the Picts, who were later invaded by Celts from Northern Ireland, some very mysterious and legendary warrior women lived. Okay, let me say that again. In ancient Scotland, land of the Picts, who were later invaded by Celts from Northern Ireland, some very mysterious and legendary warrior women lived. They were Amazonian battle fighters and witch shamans, a lesbian bisexual sisterhood entrusted with the guardianship of their tribe's secret powers and visions. According to Jean Markel in Women of the Celts, all the great Celtic warrior heroes were initiated into the profession of arms and also into the sacred mysteries of sex by these women. The Picts were the Picts were the naked shock troops of all the Celtic nations. They went into battle, women and men, side by side, wearing only their blue body paint, sacred to the Earth Mother. They were called Picts. Indo-European peak, meaning tattooed or painted, as they decorated their entire bodies with these blue tattoos of all the magic birds, beasts, and fish belonging to the Great Mother. They practiced communal sex rites and sometimes ritual cannibalism. The Celtic women generally were known for their great physical strength and ferocious bravery in battle. Roman historians wrote that among the Gauls, the women were almost as tall as the men and equal in courage. Okay. Wow. That's very interesting, Dr. B. That you said, see that you said that you've seen imagery of this. Beyonce depicted this in her Black is King album visuals. This is very interesting. The Celtic women, would this be the Anunnaki? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Just because of the color, and they say the Anunnaki were black, and the Celts would not be. Okay, so the Celtic women generally were known for their great physical strength and ferocious bravery in battle. Roman historians wrote that among the Gauls, the women were almost as tall as the men and equal in courage. The Teutonic, as well as the Celtic tribes, were often led into battle by warrior queens, and the invading Roman soldiers reportedly fearing the fighting women more than their male companions. As Briffault noted again and again, among primitive people not yet contaminated by the physical habits and role playing of civilization, it was common to find the women equal in stature, often larger than the men, with greater musculature and endurance capacities. Among Stone Age skeletons of Neanderthals, it is often impossible to determine sex by size or weight of bones. Early females and males were almost equal in stature, equally strong. As seen in the most ancient Paleolithic images of the goddess, the solid strength and massiveness of the female body was an ideal. And certainly the human race and earlier hominids couldn't have survived 2 to 3 million years of catastrophic earth changes if females had been as physically weak and mentally dependent during those long, hard ages as we are supposed to be today. Anne Cameron's Daughters of Copper Woman, stories of Northwest Pacific Indian women from Vancouver Island, gives us a real picture of the strengths needed by early women. To be fit as mothers, as lovers, food and shelter producers, as wise women, as visionaries, as creators and guardians of a whole people's culture, these females began undergoing rigorous physical training programs long before puberty to develop every strength of mind, of heart, of leg and arm muscle, and of spirit needed by them to be grown women, i.e., fully evolved human beings. And so the young women of ancient matriarchal Sparta also developed skilled and athletic bodies. When they married, the wedding ceremony included a wrestling match with their new mate. In civilized patriarchal society, on the other hand, a physically undeveloped, lobotomized, and desexualized woman can live what is called a normal life. Here are the memorable thoughts of the psychosurgeons. Lobotomized women make good housekeepers. It is more socially acceptable to lobotomize women than men because creativity, which the operation totally destroys, is in this society an expendable nullity in women. There is no such thing as partial liberation. No one can be economically free while sexually repressed and bifurcated. No one can be sexually liberated while an economic slave. No one can enjoy mental freedom while the body's labor and sexuality are exploited and conditioned by oppression. And if we pretend that we can free our spirits while the bodies, minds, and emotions of humanity are still straitened by biophobic and exploitive sexual, social, and economic ideologies, we delude ourselves. Freedom is all or nothing, and there is no freedom for males of any class or color or ethnic group while the female remains unfree. Ancient bisexual woman was inventor, scientist, builder, artist, healer, producer of craft and culture, shaman, ecstatic visionary, warrior, and leader. This is our total potential when our life energies are not divided against themselves and against us, blocked and distorted by cultural and religious stereotypes. This is just the beginning of our potential when our energies are able to flow out freely to create the world, as symbolized by the self-sustaining power of the Gynandrous Great Mother. Next chapter, Mysteries of the Throne, the Cave, and the Labyrinth. To return to our beginnings, all religion is about the mystery of creation. If the mystery of birth is the origin of religion, It is to the woman that we must look for the phenomena that first made her aware of the unseen power. Primeval woman, like the animals, probably first knew she was pregnant when she felt the first movement within her at the quickening. She was not aware of the male's part in conception, nor of the moment of inception of pregnancy. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, it's my grandbaby. She was not aware of the male's part in conception, nor of the moment of inception of pregnancy. Of course, she would notice breast swelling, perhaps nausea, but doubtless she would understand this first quickening movement as the beginning of the process leading to birth. Among people worldwide who believe that a woman is impregnated by the spirits or by the wind, this first movement would be the kinetic announcement of the entrance of the new spirit being into her body. Woman's awe at her capacity to create life is the basis of mystery. Earliest religious images show pregnancy rather than birth and nurturing as the numinous or magical state. Numerous Paleolithic figurines of women representing the pregnant goddess go back over 30,000 years. It is not until the Middle Neolithic, which is circa 6,000 to 5,000 BC, that figures of the Great Mother holding a child appear. These are fascinating figures from Katal Hayuk and Hakalar in the region of modern Turkey. The first, carved in gray-green schist, shows the goddess as two female bodies, back to back, one nursing an infant and the other embracing a lover. The Hakalar clay statuette shows a nursing male child with his genitals near the mother's vulva. In both statues, the female is larger than the male. Both show the beginnings within the Great Mother religion of a companion worship of a young male who is both her son and her lover. For many Neolithic centuries, this son lover of the great goddess is the only thing approaching a male god to be found. And coupled with the mother, it remained a central image in later Near Eastern religions, e.g., Isis and the child Horus in Egypt. Mary with both the newborn and the dead Jesus in her arms. In pre-dynastic Egypt, the goddess of the women was Ta-Ert, the Great One, who was imaged. I know, right? Yeah, that's something to think about. Okay, so in pre-dynastic Egypt, but I will say this, it ties together because again, as we're looking at looking at and reviewing all of this imagery, we must keep in mind that the imagery it's there's what's that, metaphysical. Basically, all of this imagery is metaphysical, and we'll get and they will get into that after laying the foundation. Okay, yes, very true. Okay, so now going back to, let's see, and coupled with okay, so in pre-dynastic Egypt, the goddess of the women was Ta'ert, the Great One, who was imaged as a pregnant hippopotamus standing on its hind legs. Figures of Ta'ert are amongst the earliest Egyptian amulets, and her worship continued until the coming of Christianity, and probably secretly among women for centuries after. You got away, okay? Christian and other patriarchal priesthoods have never been any help to women in the great female experiences of menstruation, pregnancy, childbirth, and nursing. Clearly, the pregnant goddess of the Cro-Magnon caves, Ta'ert, and later goddesses of pregnancy and birth were shaped out of women's needs and experiences and beliefs. This is the original transformation mystery, primordial birth, in which we struggle alone, facing death and pain in order to create life within the cosmic womb of the unknown. Only women are ever truly alone, as the universe is alone within herself. And birth is the supreme paradox of aloneness, when a woman in sweating and groaning solitude brings forth the continuity of human life. Men can only imitate this experience by participating in the goddess mysteries of rebirth in the sacred caves. And in fact, worldwide, men's original rituals were imitations of the female mysteries of menstruation and childbirth. Images of the pregnant goddess were also found in the excavations of Tel Haraf, dating from 5000 BC. This goddess is shown sitting on the earth, embodying the earth that belongs to her. In ritual and custom, to sit on something has the symbolic meaning of taking possession. In later matriarchal times, she was the throne. The throne symbolized her lap. The queen came to power by sitting on this lap or womb of the goddess, so becoming one with her power. Among the Ashanti of West Africa, there was a cult of the throne, and giant throne replicas have been found in the Ashanti graves. The Black goddess was worshipped throughout the Ashanti territory. All the great mountains were seen as the goddess sitting on the earth. The mountain was the original throne womb. It combines the symbols of earth, cave, bulk, height, and immortality. In the towering mountain overlooking the land is embodied the enormous strength of the goddess. Throughout Thracian, Macedonian, Greek, and Cretan lands are mountains with huge thrones at their summits, carved laboriously from the rock. These are the empty thrones, waiting for the goddess to take her seat. This custom was taken over by later patriarchal kings. To be enthroned is to be empowered, i.e., to receive the power of the Great Mother and her mandate to rule. This is why Egyptian paintings and statues depict the small mortal king sitting on the throne lap of the huge goddess Isis. In this way, the king was reborn or made immortal and thereby given the sacred power to rule over the people. He had true power only as her son. Can't you get your phone? I can't. Can you get her? Give her the phone. I can't believe she doesn't want the phone. Okay. Sorry, guys. The cave, as the womb of the earth goddess, was considered by the ancients to be the repository of mystic influences. In the original cosmology, a cave was the symbol of the whole world, providing passage for the dead. Let me say that again. In the original cosmology, a cave was the symbol of the whole world, providing passage for the dead and for the rebirth of souls. Many tribal people today still hold the belief that their first mythic ancestors emerged from caverns or mounds in the earth. The cave was the home of our Ice Age ancestors when they were making the transition from hominids to Homo sapiens. Paleolithic caves were the matrix of internalized consciousness, womb-like, skull-like, tomb-like. Animal souls were believed to live in the dark, echoing caverns. This is where one went to commune with the deepest, most resonant, and awesome powers. The wall paintings of animals and humans in the innermost sanctuaries could be reached only with great difficulty, along winding paths, narrow ledges, slippery and dangerous passages, often crawling on hands and knees. These were the narrow, winding passageways of birth and rebirth. I am the way and the life. This was the primordial revelation of the Great Mother. As G. Rachel Levy observes, early people conceived the divine body as the road traveled by itself and its seeker. The Great Mother was the body of life. She was also the way that must be traveled to realize life. It was in the spiral or labyrinth that the way had to be danced or walked in all the rites of the mother throughout the ages and the world. The way is always connected with a cave/womb and with a maze-like spiraling entrance and exit. Labyrinths, situated at cave entrances, are always presided over by a mythical woman. Among ancient Cretans, as among present-day Hopis in the American Southwest, the earth womb is depicted as a maze, and the mythic place of emergence of the whole people and of the individual soul is called the place of birth or rebirth. Visually, the Cretan maze womb and the Hopi maze womb are identical. In Hindu tradition, both the convolutions of the brain and the eightfold stages of the mind, the manas, are identified with the winding spiral form of the labyrinth. A labyrinth both creates and protects the still center, the heart, allowing entry only to the initiated. Before larger knowledge is revealed, old preconceptions must be dissolved by the psychic and ecstatic re-entry into the original cosmic womb/cave of the mother. The pathways between the two worlds were trodden by humans in magic dances and rituals. Perhaps the human collective actually generated as well as absorbed the life forces of the goddess in these rites, since the roads taken by the divine power are themselves currents of energy. Among hunting and gathering peoples, the shamans still go into caves to experience visions, dreams, and spiritual rebirth, and to gain healing powers through resonant communion with the dead. The dead are especially sacred to the goddess since they directly partake of her being, spirits awaiting rebirth through her physical manifestations. The familiar bull roarer, still in use among Aboriginal people, produces the terrible whirring sound of the spiral, the strange whirlwind of passage between the two worlds. Extremely complex ideas were expressed through the symbol of the labyrinth. First, the initiate had to find the way through the underworld, the womb of the mother, going through symbolic death to be reborn again through her on a larger psychic level. Simultaneously, by dancing the winding and unwinding spiral, the initiate reached back to the still heart of cosmos and saw immortality in her. The dance would have been combined with sexual rites and the taking of some hallucinogen, like the legendary soma. In the resulting illumination, soma and self were experienced as one with the cosmic self in orgasmic ego death. The ecstatic center of the labyrinth was the no mind center of orgasm, experienced as death, creative madness, and loss of the conditioned self. Sexual magic was practiced for the sake of ecstatic self-transcendence, a sexual spiritual fusion of the human with the cosmic all. Prana, or life current, in mystic Indian thought, is interrelated with sexual energy and can be directed by breathing techniques. Mind and breath united and rhythmically directed towards a chosen goal is the basis for sexual magic. Breath/air is linked with mind, the creatrix of ideas. They are experienced as identical. The breath or the prana is used by the yogi to compel the upward surge of kundalini, the sleeping serpent at the base of the spine, the sexual chakra. Kundalini, the serpent power, is dormant cosmic fire, and she, activated through controlled and concentrated breathing, rises through the six lotuses or body centers, chakras, to unite in the seventh, highest center with pure consciousness or samadhi. With this union, liberation is attained, which is true nature and union with cosmic self. Kundalini, the mystic fire, is also expressed sexually as as in Tantra yoga. Here is the awakening of the great magic power, which is Shakti Kundalini, the cosmic movement, which is Shakti, and her movement in the human body, which is Kundalini, their ultimate union bringing great power, the eternally spiraling serpent force through which is experienced cosmic timelessness. In Tibetan mystery schools, the breath plays a vital part in the process of dying. If consciousness is retained to the last through proper knowledge and concentration, then the breath or soul passes over consciously to the after death of the organism. There is similar thought in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, based on the mysteries of Isis and Osiris. I don't like that she didn't call it the Egyptian Book of the Coming Forth by Day. It's not the Book of the Dead. But okay, I digress. Consciousness must be retained to and through the moment of death. Me too. I have that book too, doctor. Consciousness must be retained to and through the moment of death to enable the soul to take the right path, the way through the underworld. Concentrated unity of the psyche brings release from the power of death. And that's why I said I'm not coming back here anymore. Because I'm gonna make sure this, I'm working hard. I'm working hard. The same method appears in facts. Yes. The same method appears in The Secret of the Golden Flower, a Chinese book deriving from ancient matriarchal Taoist ideas. Jungians pay respect to these mystic and symbolic perceptions of ancient peoples, but still fear the female realms. This Western rationalist prejudice and fear distorts Jungian commentary on the timeless ritual transformations of the labyrinth. In all cultures, the labyrinth has the meaning of an entangling and confusing. Now, this is Jungian commentary. So, in quotes, it says that in all cultures, the labyrinth has the meaning of an entangling and confusing representation of the world of matriarchal consciousness. It can be traversed only by those who are ready for a special initiation into the mysterious world of the collective unconscious, unquote. In Indian mystic symbolism, the multiplicity of this world is shown by the interpenetration of the upward male triangles or phallic and the downward female triangles or vulva, the ascending and descending vortices of creative energy. This vulva image, the descending triangle, which signifies cosmic energy spiraling down into manifestation through matter, is a very ancient symbol. It has been found in Paleolithic caves, inscribed on stone blocks lying face downwards on the ground, and within engraved stone circles in the cavern's depths. Ancient people believed that power resided in images themselves, or rather in the resonance between the image and the thing imaged. And this belief still lives in all of us. Symbols continue to have great power over the human mind and heart. Contemporary hunting and gathering people, such as the Australian Aborigines, maintain connections with mythical ancestors by tracing sacred paintings and dreamtime maps on the walls of secret caves. We can imagine that ancient women gained cosmic energy by touching and tracing the sacred vulva sign of the great goddess. Just as initiates gained the power and insight of ecstatic death and rebirth by tracing and retracing the sacred spirals of the labyrinth, the womb tomb maze of the great Earth Mother. The cult of the dead. The idea of the living dead can be traced far back. Okay. The idea of the living dead can be traced far back also to Paleolithic times, where it existed first among the Neanderthals who buried their dead wrapped in fetal position, the bodies and skeletons painted red. Neanderthals also set up bear skull shrines deep in their caves. Next came the Cro-Magnons of Western and Southern Europe. They displaced the Neanderthals, but also interbred with them and followed many of the same burial practices. They had a cult of the dead and a cult of the skull, also burying their dead curled up and daubed with red ochre. This ochre painting of bodies and bones with the magic life color of blood was for countless millennia believed to give life to the dead who were buried lovingly with cherished possessions in the floors of the caves where they had lived. The cave was the womb of the mother, and she who gave birth would also give rebirth. Human religious ideas of death and resurrection go back at least this far. From these burial practices of the Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons, we can assume their belief in themselves as indivisible spiritual entities. Though their material lives were primitive by our standards, in their aesthetic and spiritual iconographies, they are revealed as deeply feeling and evolved beings. They conceived and experienced a union between the divine and cosmic. They conceived and experienced a union between the divine cosmic cycle, the cycles of animal, plant, and human life, and the recent dead. The cycles of animal, plant, and human life, and oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute, let me say it again. So they conceived and experienced a union between the divine cosmic cycle, the cycles of animal, plant, and human life, and the recent dead. All ancient and contemporary Aboriginal people conceive death as naturally continuous with life. Perhaps the need for unity and reunion expressed by these ceremonies is the first acknowledgement of a conscious sense of separation in the evolution of human consciousness. At any rate, in the first human religious rites, rebirth, resurrection, reincarnation were believed to occur within the body of the mother, as birth, death, and rebirth occur in the great cycles of nature. The further back one goes into ancient cultures, the more holy enters nearly every phase and activity of life. Okay, the further back one goes into ancient cultures, the more the holy enters nearly every phase and activity of life. Being born, giving birth, making pots, digging food, planting seed, making tools, hunting, building a fire, all are acts whose major aspects fall within the sacred sphere. Social groups have magic religious foundations. Rites of transition from one life stage to another required group participation in ritualized expression, all designed to keep the individual's psyche united and imbalanced while passing through crisis. Death was one of those major life events requiring ritual participation by the group, aimed at reharmonizing the survivors as well as easing the passage of the dead. Even after people left the caves and took up living in small settled villages, the dead continued to be buried close by. In the matriarchal town of Middle Neolithic Katal Hayuk, generations of the dead were buried under the floors of the homes beneath the sleeping platforms. In this way, they continued to participate in the everyday lives of the living. Their presence was a recognized part of the ongoing life of the matrifocal group, and women shamans performed the death ceremonies. Like magic weavers, they connected the collective dream state in which past, present, and future psychic and physical realities merge with the textured realms of the dead. Drugs such as hallucinogenic mushrooms were used as one means of perceiving the underlying realities of the mystic connection. Funeral rites also always included some form of self-wounding, since blood accompanies birth, the moon cycle, food killing, and other crucial life stages, as well as death. Blood is the physical counterpart of the mysterious terrestrial and cosmic life flows, and so women's transformation mysteries were all blood mysteries. Next chapter, the mother of wild animals and the dance. Commenting on the almost total blindness of male historians vis-a-vis the obvious female orientation of the Upper Paleolithic, William Irwin Thompson writes, because we have separated humanity from nature, subject from object, values from analysis, knowledge from myth, and universities from the universe, it is enormously difficult for anyone but a poet or a mystic to understand what is going on in the holistic and mythopoeic thought of Ice Age humanity. The very language we use to discuss the past speaks of tools, hunters, and men, when every statue and painting we discover cries out to us that this Ice Age humanity was a culture of art, the love of animals, and women. Gathering is as important as hunting, but only hunting is discussed. Storytelling is discussed, but the storyteller is a hunter rather than an old priestess of the moon. Initiation is imagined, but the initiate is not the young girl in Menarche about to be wed to the moon, but a young man about to become a great hunter. What the historians leave blank, our imaginations can fill in with bright pictures like those covering the sacred cave walls. We know that women's religious rights were never separable from a totality of art, magic, and social and physical realities. The matriarchal group organized its power into a religious and cultural human expression through the medium of art. Art was the tool of the connection, the manifest vision, expressing experience of a single life-giving principle conserved in the changeless otherworld of the deep caves, where there is perpetual darkness and time becomes spatial, resonant, and static. In such a standing silence as within a giant living skull, the dream images make themselves known. The great goddess was the mother of wild animals. The inner recesses and womb walls of the caverns were alive with magic pictures of her breasts. She was herself an animal, all the animals. In many of the early images, she wears an animal mask. As in ancient Chinese Taoism, so in Western pagan religions, the female principle was the transforming animal, the energy of metamorphosis and hence evolution. The brilliant rush of European animal imagery from Cro-Magnon through Celtic, Nordic, and Teutonic art, and incorporated into medieval bestiaries and illuminated manuscripts, expressed this primal dynamic vision of evolutionary energy as a surge of spirit into multitudinous forms. The goddess kept her various animal shapes for many thousands of years, among them the doe, the owl, the hare, the vulture, the pig, the cow, the wild mare, the lioness, the crow, the crane, the salmon, the jackal, the hermaphroditic snail, the serpent, the wren, the butterfly, the chrysalis, and the spider. Early human attitude towards animals was totemistic. Totem means related through the mother. The blood clan solidarity was identified with some specific animal or plant. Through the totem, the life of the human group and the ongoing life of nature were made inseparable. This is the meaning of sacrament, the absorption by humans of the non-human, a cosmic flow of forms. The secret spirit lives in and through the multitude of plant and animal forms, which the goddess can assume at will. This means that any tree or beast, bird or fish or insect is symbolically, potentially her and must be related to with magic and respect. Individual members of a species die, but the group form remains, is permanent, is one of the Great Mother's ideal forms. This is the primal conception of reincarnation. Later, European pagans believed in individual soul reincarnation through many forms, animal and human, and demonic, as the mechanism of biological as well as spiritual evolution. The animism of primal peoples has been called childish. In fact, it is a profound experiential perception of the evolutionary relation between all life forms as manifestations of the original one, the first cell from which all life multiplied, the original cosmic egg. When human survival depends on such a sensitive rapport with the environment, as it always has and always will, such a conception is not infantile but crucial. Human survival does indeed depend on a sacramental relation to nature. Now that this relation has been betrayed and destroyed, we know how important it was and is. A sacramental bond between our earliest human ancestors and the natural world was the primary factor in our evolution, not simply as a physical species, but as conscious beings. For this bonding set up a resonance in which all art, all religious ritual, all magic, alchemic science, all spiritual striving for illumination was born. As primal people have always experienced it, when you look and listen to nature, something appears, something always speaks. Animism is still a valid relationship. If modern man neither sees nor hears, the fault is in his dead sensorium. In primitive belief, no animal can be killed against its wish. When a member of a species is struck down, the one is wounded. Therefore, the hunter must fast and pray to the animal spirit before the hunt, not simply to ask its pardon, but to gain its assent to being killed. The hunted animal is seen to give itself to the hunter as human food while its spirit returns to the group form. Because men did all the large game hunting and felt themselves to be tracking and slaying brother and sister animals, magic children like themselves of Mother Earth, we know they felt guilt and sought its resolution. After the spilling of blood, one must restore harmony with the dead animal and with the mother of animals, as its soul persists through the multiplicity of lives and deaths. Cave paintings from the Upper Paleolithic show stick figure male hunters or entranced shamans alongside beautifully rendered bison and other game animals. The hunter's or shaman's spear may be shown juxtaposed with the vulvas of female animals. They were seeing the animal's wound as a magic vulva of the goddess and trying to establish a union or symbolic resolution with the violence of killing. As penis to vulva, which bleeds and heals itself, so spear to wound. Rock carvings and paintings found in North Africa, identical in theme to the European cave paintings, make this analogy between penis and arrow, goddess's vulva, and animal wound, with circular lines returning the energy in a vulva to vulva cycle. In all these Stone Age depictions of the hunt, there is not one image of aggressive or bloodthirsty hunters engaged in wanton slaughter. There are only images of prayerful petition and worshipful observation. As Thompson points out, these Paleolithic paintings of vulvas as magic wounds that heal themselves or give birth to new life continue as symbolic images through Western religious history. Medieval paintings show Christ exposing his wound, from which blood and water flowed during the crucifixion, as from a uterus in childbirth. The labial wound in the side of Christ is an expression that the male shaman, to have magical power, must take on the power of woman. The magical labial wound is the seal of the resurrection and an expression of the myth of eternal recurrence. From Christ to the Fisher King of the Grail legends, the man suffering from a magical wound is no ordinary man. He is the man who has transcended the duality of sexuality, the man with a vulva, the shamanistic androgyny. These pagan meanings were kept alive, not in Orthodox Christianity, certainly, but in the Gnostic tradition, which recognized magic, bisexuality, the alchemical androgyny, the necessity of the male to experience his female wound. The Grail legend has been traced back to the Neolithic Near Eastern goddess religion, but in fact, it goes back much further to the sacred Cro-Magnon caves and the Stone Age hunters' attempt to resolve bloodletting guilt symbolically and ecstatically through a fusion of his sex spirit with the magic vulva wound of the mother goddess. Ritual cannibalism began with the same symbolic desire, not solely to propitiate but to participate in the magic life, death, rebirth process. Among primal people, the totemic animal is sometimes eaten as a sacrament by the group, or it is totally avoided as a group taboo. Either way, human hunger, killing, and eating are felt as unbalancing acts, which must be reharmonized through sacramental rites. Ritual cannibalism doubtless began with shared eating of the totem animal, a taking in of the animal's life force by the group to participate in its death, in its lifeblood, is to partake of its eternal rebirth to the mother. Where it occurred in the world, ritual cannibalism, like hunting, was predominantly or exclusively a male activity. We can see in it early man's desire not to separate himself and to reestablish magic bonds with the mother after the spilling of her blood. This sacred cannibalism is still practiced symbolically in the Christian communion. Another mode of group intoxication, of ecstatic rebalancing, is the dance. Sacred circles made with stones are found in the deep Paleolithic caves, and in them the traces of human feet that danced around the cave. That danced around and around. Cave paintings show the shaman dancing in animal skins and antler headdress. The footmarks on the cave floors reveal generations of ritual dancing by all women, men, children. Dancing to and with the spirits of the animals is the most ancient human ceremony that we know. Masked dances, like dancing the maze, were a deliberate means of approach to the biomystical animal world and to the great mother within and beyond all forms. Pantomimic dance is of the essence of each and every mystery function. In Themis, Jane Ellen Harrison describes how the primal dancing group projects its aroused energies outward into the creation of a god. Beginning with the mimetic rites, wearing animal masks, feathers, horns, and claws, dancing to a common rhythm, common excitement, members of the group become emotionally supercharged and one. Initially, no God concept is involved, but the collective emotion is overwhelmingly felt as something more than the experience of the individual, as something dominant and external. Dithyramb meant Dithyramb meant originally song of birth. The ecstatic choric dance literally gave birth to the god. Group emotional energy becomes the raw material of the godhead. In time, a leader of the dance is slowly differentiated. The dancers become audience worshipers of something beyond. Prayer and sacrifice reveals that severance is complete. The community of emotions ceases, restructured into hierarchic observance, and the primal chorus loses all sense or memory that the God is themselves. We forget the God is always ourselves. Harrison's description shows the social and sheer biological origins of religion. The creation of divinity, not from private prayer or individual moral abstraction, but from its chthonic roots in physical, collective, ecstatic energies. Like many early 20th century students of ancient mythology, however, Harrison's thought reveals as Freudian influence. Harrison's thought reveals a Freudian influence, a belief the creation of God is only a one-way process. Like Freud, Harrison sourced human cultural expression, like art, dance, religion, in unsatisfied desire, and seemed to agree that all experience of the sacred was reducible to psychological projection. Witness the analytic urge to demystify the mystery. The Freudian school knew no quantum physics or energies beyond the human, but there are other dimensions than the spatially temporal tangible, even though the linear mind is not structured to perceive them. Spiritual or magical experience is an impingement of these other dimensions. other force fields into our ordinary rational reality. A dancing group can project its entranced emotion into Godhead. Through a tranced and rhythmic opening of psychic channels, it can also introject the Godhead, pulling down transhuman powers. Both directions of this process can really occur simultaneously. The group generates and renews the power. The power generates and renews the group. The spiraling process gives birth in both directions. Later, priestly ideas that the gods demanded constant human supplication, obeisance, and abasement are wrong and exploitative, but they derive from this genuine primordial perception of an energy exchange between humans and transhuman powers, a vibratory field communication that must go both ways for the connection to work. Chimpanzees do rain dances for no logical reason other than to reconnect their animal energies with the transhuman energies of rain, thunder, and lightning, the original chemical dance of life. And the apocryphal Jesus says, "The whole on high hath part in our dancing. Who danceth not knoweth not what cometh to pass." This idea is incorporated in the Gnostic round dance, but its origins are not in Christianity by any means, but in the earliest pagan Paleolithic sacred cave dances, even beyond that, in the dances of chimpanzees, and beyond that, in the first circling dances of molecules, of atoms, of quarks among the cosmic spiral. The sacred dance takes us beyond the god of morality and back to the goddess of ecstasy, beyond obeisance to a social hierarchy and back to a original communion with sheer evolutionary energy. That is why such Gnostic texts were branded apocryphal and why the medieval Gnostics were persecuted and burned at the stake by the Orthodox Church, because they spoke a pagan and primordial truth, old as the universe, who is the first dancer. One of the earliest images we know of the mother of wild animals and the dance is the Venus of Losol, a bas relief from a cave in the Dordogne Valley, France, dating circa 19,000 BC. This icon shows the Great Mother standing with a bison horn upheld in her right hand. The horn is a lunar crescent, and the relief is painted with red ochre, the magic color of menstruation and birth. Such a figure presided over the masked shamanic dances and the circle dances of communion with all animals, all life, in which blood, woman, moon, bison, horn, birth, magic, the cycle of life are all analogized in a continuous resonance or harmony of sacred energies. This Lhasa, Great Mother, holding the lunar horn, became the Virgin and the unicorn, one horn, of medieval legend. The marvelous tapestries of the Middle Ages, all woven by women, frequently tell of the story of the unicorn who may be touched and tamed only by a chaste virgin. As Thompson notes, the unicorn is a lunar symbol of the ancient religion of Europe, the Great Mother religion, and the ritual drama of the macho hunter chasing and slaying this magic beast represents a trace memory of the shift from the moon worshiping matrifocal European pagan society to the to the patriarchal sun worship of the Roman Empire and the Christian Church. Such traces of the Paleolithic hunt goddess and her magic relation to all the beasts can be found throughout European folklore, art, alchemy, witchcraft, and other heresies. They can also be found throughout the world: Asia, Africa, the Americas. They are found everywhere human beings are found because they represent our original heart and mind. Among the Stone Age cave paintings are images of great women with upraised arms, some with their arms supported by smaller male figures on either side. Legendarily, sacred women stood in this position during the hunt, acting as receivers of cosmic energy. Among the stone Among the African Stone Age, cliff paintings found by Mary Leakey in central Tanzania, the hunt dancers are almost always women who move their bodies in the shapes and gestures of the animals. Among the Kalahari Bushmen today, a shaman woman performs a special invocation dance on the dawn of the hunt day, invoking the protective dawn star, Venus, who is called the hunter, and communing with the spirits of the animals who will voluntarily die to feed humans. Among these Kalahari Aboriginals, also, the Milky Way was created by a young girl in Monarch who, feeling lonely, threw the ashes of her fire into the night sky to create a friendly light for her people. The African Hottentots sing and chant to the rain spirit, who is a pregnant moon goddess called Goro. Though, thou who has painted thy body red, thou who does not drop the menses. Before their invocation dance, they paint their bodies red with ochre, which is called gorod, after her blood red color. Australian Aboriginals pour blood over their sacred stones and ritually paint themselves red after their dances, saying the paint is really women's menstrual blood. When we think of the 21,000-year-old Venus of Lhasa, stained with red ochre and holding up the hunter's lunar crescent horn in the sacred cave, we know what all these same rites, images, and analogies mean and where they come from. They come from our original selves as children of the Great Mother, as sisters and brothers of all her magic animals. The rites, icons, and dances conceive the earth as the body of the mother and try to restore the harmony lost when she is wounded. They aim to relate the beast's wounds to her magic vulva, which bleeds with the moon and heals itself again and again. In this way, the species spirit of the animals may be renewed through rebirth after the killing of individual members. Surely in these dances and rituals, we see the world meaning of all religious symbolism, but more clearly and beautifully because closer to the source. Western history does not show us any evolution toward greater spirit, greater meaning, greater culture. The Western Roman Christian contribution to the world, when we look at it, has been almost entirely in the area of technology and of analytical intellect, combined with a notorious and spiritual cultural alienation, and perhaps the loneliest individuals the planet has ever seen. What there still is of spirit, of poetry, of coherent meaning, of symbolic truth in the world did not come from us. It was there at the beginning among our Stone Age ancestors. Their vision, their cosmology, their intuitive truth and sacred analogies run like bright red threads through the tapestry of Western history. Whatever is still alive and vibrating in patriarchal religions, especially Christianity, when traced to its source, is found to be one of these bloody living fibers retained, parentheses, stolen from the original Paleolithic cosmology, woven by these Ice Age people out of their primal pagan experience of the Great Mother and her magic world. What has followed them in the mythic, religious, spiritual, and psychic realms, at least, has been no great advance, but a devolution, a corruption, a narrowing and hardening, an atrophy of vision and heart. Our stone ancestors would have no trouble understanding the wounds of Smahala, a Nez Perce, who sang the primal truth to the white man's world of 19th century business and resource development oriented America. Here's the quote: "My young men shall never work. Men who work cannot dream, and wisdom comes in dreams. You ask me to plow the ground. Shall I take a knife and tear my mother's breast? Then when I die, she will not take me to her bosom to rest. You ask me to dig for stone. Shall I dig under her skin for bones? Then when I die, I cannot enter her body and be born again. You ask me to cut grass and make hay and sell it and be rich like the white man. But how can I cut off my mother's hair? It is bad law, and my people cannot obey it. I want my people to stay with me here. All the dead humans will come to life again. We must wait here in the house of our ancestors and be ready to meet in the body of our mother. And we have, let's see, it's 10:10. We are going into the next chapter, and this is part 3 of this book. Now we are on part 3, Women's Culture and Religion in Neolithic Times. And we're looking at now, this chapter is focusing on the first settled villages. The Neolithic Revolution, occurring circa 10,000 BC, was the creation of women. Through the long generations of human evolution, it was the females who had dug the earth for food, gathering roots and grasses, wild grains and berries to be used for nourishment, medicine, and clothing fibers. Women were the skilled observers of plant nature, passing on from generation to generation their knowledge of food, medical, toxic, and mind-changing properties of the wild plants, fungi, and herbs in their environment. And it was women who had a special relation to the earth as daughters related to the body of the Great Mother. Where groups of women and their children settled, culture took root, growing slowly into Neolithic villages. During the Paleolithic or Old Stone Age, the centers of the cave culture that we know of were in Western and Southern Europe. As the last glaciers receded and human migration increased, centers of human culture shifted to the moist and fertile valleys of the Near East, where the first systematic cultivation of grain occurred. Wild wheat and emmer grew there, water conditions were good, and there were wild goats to be domesticated. By 7000 BC, agriculture was well established in Jordan, Iran, and Anatolia, which is modern Turkey. These new Stone Age people were matriarchal and goddess worshippers. They entered Anatolia and the Near East via Thrace. There were 3 centers of settled agriculture in the Near East. On the western slopes and valleys of the Zagros Mountains, where the Tigris empties into the Persian Gulf, in the hill country of Turkish, Syrian Mesopotamia, and on the South Anatolian plain, now Western Turkey. Some of the oldest known settlements and the oldest known grain sickle have been found in the area of Palestine. These are the remains of the Natufian Neolithic culture, which lasted until circa 6000 BC. The people of the most ancient city of Tel Es Sultan, now Jericho, practiced a cult of skulls and buried their dead in deep pits under the floors of their houses. The first layer of the city dates from 8000 to 7000 BC and was built in the shape of the crescent moon. At its earliest levels, the culture seems very advanced. The houses were built in beehive shape, constructed with sun-dried clay bricks. Floors were sunk into the earth, strewn with sand and covered with clay. Timber was also used in construction. Remains of a wooden staircase have been found. The city is surrounded by an 18-foot high wall of regularly shaped stones, and this is surrounded by a protecting ditch or moat 27 feet wide, cut 9 feet deep into the solid rock. Architecture and building techniques at Tel Es Sultan are at least as advanced as those of medieval European fortresses. The strange thing is that no tools for cutting such huge stone blocks, no axes, picks, or chisels have been found. In the rooms of all the houses were found images of the goddess. Jericho was founded at the site of a sacred spring, and the original structure, beneath many layers of the debris from later buildings, has been identified as a shrine to the local spirit. Successive cities were built around the same sacred place, the spirit of which became the founding deity. She received the sacrifices offered by the settlers, perhaps in expiation for using the earth body in this new agricultural way, and she gave the law by which the city was governed. Implicit in this law was a contract between humans and the goddess. The people permitted a conditional use of the land for farming and building in return for our observances paid to the goddess. The next oldest settlement in the area dates from 6500 BC. These people built triangular houses with rooms more than 21 feet long and 12 feet wide around a courtyard with a central hearth. The bricks were given a plaster coating, and there are no corners or broken lines in this architecture. The walls are gently curved, molded by hand, as the Pueblo houses of the American Southwest are still hand adobe today by the women. The walls were painted red or yellow and were highly burnished. These houses had drains. Spindle whorls and loom weights were found in the ruins, but no traces of pottery. The women used stone vessels. A chapel has been found containing a stone menhir, a carved stone pillar with oval point and breast, representing the goddess. The best known of these Anatolian cities is Katal Hayuk, excavated by James Millart in the 1960s. This complex town, a ceremonial center for the goddess religion, flowered between 6500 and 5650 BC. Katal Hayuk was very large for its day, 30 to 35 acres in extent. 12 successive layers have been excavated and no signs of warfare or weaponry have been found. There are also no signs of animal slaughter within the town, though there are murals depicting the old ritual of the hunt. The people were peaceful agriculturalists, mostly vegetarian. Katal Hayuk was situated near the obsidian trade routes and was a major trading center for grains and probably also religious icons. Women's skills as gardeners and agriculturalists are manifest here. The presence of numerous querns, mortars, pounders, grinders, storage pits, and sickle blades shows a growing abundance of food. And burial sites containing luxury objects indicate a surplus of goods and therefore trade. There are many obsidian objects and cowrie shells, which are goddess symbols, from coastal regions. At Katal Hayuk, the most honored burials were of women and children. Before burial, bodies were exposed so their bones could be picked clean by vultures, the sacred bird of the death goddess. Women and children were buried in central graves directly under the sleeping platforms inside the houses, with signs of ritual respect and love, amulets and icons, obsidian mirrors and toys buried with them. Men were buried in smaller corner sites, never with children, and with their Stone Age hunt weapons. The whole town seems to have been dedicated to the Great Mother religion and to religious artisanry. At least 40 shrines have been found in Katal Hayuk of all of the goddess. Murals on temple walls show shaman women as vultures. Women's breasts are molded in relief on shrine walls, surmounted by cow horns and surrounded by imprints of human hands, the same handprints found throughout the Paleolithic caves. Here, the great goddess is shown in mural images and statues in her triple aspect as a young woman, a mother giving birth, and an old woman or crone accompanied by a vulture. These are the three phases of the moon: waxing, full, and waning. Katal Hayuk was also built over a sacred well, and the site designed in coordination with natural and cosmic laws, the lines and centers of the Earth's energies, and the positions of the stars. To build at a place was to share the life of that place. It was an organic and spiritual location. Earliest agriculture must have grown up around the shrines of the Great Mother, which were social and trade centers as well as holy places. The priestesses of the goddess were also administrators, scribes, and traders. The goddess of the Neolithic became the teacher of planting, harvesting, and storage methods, as well as healer and dispenser of curative herbs, roots, and plants. Eric Fromm, in The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, that's a book, speculates on the meaning of this culture. The fact that among hundreds of skeletons covering at least 800 years of continuous culture, not one shows signs of violent death. The fact that women seem to outnumber men and are buried with great honor. The fact that the religion of Katal Hayuk, administered by priestesses, stress the renewing and protecting powers of the Great Mother. He writes, the data that speak in favor of the view that Neolithic society was relatively egalitarian without hierarchy, exploitation, or marked aggression are suggestive. The fact, however, that these Neolithic villages in Anatolia had a matriarchal, matricentric structure adds a great deal more evidence to the hypothesis that Neolithic society, at least in Anatolia, was an essentially unaggressive and peaceful society. The reason for this lies in the spirit of affirmation of life and lack of destructiveness, which J.J. Bachofin believed was an essential trait of all matriarchal societies. And I think that is a great stopping point, because then this leads us to our next chapter, which is called Southeast Europe, the Bird and Snake Goddess.